Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about that June Nintendo Direct. Finally, I'm going to be doing my official predictions for this Nintendo Direct we've been waiting for since basically September of last year, because September of last year we did get the last general Nintendo Direct, as I've been calling them, the Super Nintendo Directs, these Nintendo Directs of the Switch 2 era that are over 60 minutes long. And as some of you may remember from that Nintendo Direct back in September, I was actually a little bit in the minority in talking about how the Direct was a little bit underwhelming. For me personally, I thought that what they showed off wasn't really exciting me that much about what was to come, even though they did certainly make a lot of announcements, and clearly were going to be able to put out consistent content, as Nintendo has done since then. But unsurprisingly, based off that Direct presentation, the first half of this year has personally been underwhelming to me in terms of Nintendo's output on Switch 2. They've been putting out the games, but the games haven't really been up my alley. But starting with Star Fox in June, that's changing. And I don't even think we've seen everything there is to see about Star Fox. I believe there is more, and we'll learn about that more in the upcoming June Nintendo Direct, which, yeah, I'm predicting is happening next week. Why am I predicting it's happening next week? Well, it does make a lot of sense, and also so many different people are reporting that it is happening next week. We first had Attack the Backlog talking about it happening next week, then Nash Wheel Sing was happening specifically on June 9th. Recently, Jeff Grubb has said he's also heard June 9th, and Nate the Hate has also said it's happening next week. And at this point, the overwhelming thought is that this is a real Nintendo Direct, in the sense that this is a general Nintendo Direct, not just a partner showcase like what we got last February, but a full presentation, perhaps, as I've been saying, another Super Direct over 60 minutes long. We'll see what's actually confirmed. It's not confirmed yet, but many believe this June Direct is happening. And so, what am I anticipating to be in this presentation? Well, I think there's a lot of people who are going into this presentation with lower expectations, because Nintendo has done a lot to maybe lower our expectations as of late, in large part because I'm not the only one who feels like this first half of the year has been underwhelming. But I am going to think to the contrary. I think that what we're getting here is going to be a fantastic, epic Nintendo Direct presentation. Obviously, opinions exist. I remember the Nintendo Direct from June 2024. I believed that was one of the best General Directs we had gone in many years, and not everyone agreed. Some people certainly did. Some people were excited to see The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom and Metroid Prime 4. Others didn't care for those things. So obviously there's a great deal of subjectivity here. But ultimately what I think is going to happen is what Nintendo typically does with these bigger Directs. They outline their next wave of games to carry them through pretty much all the major stuff until they would have another Direct that would tell us more about that next wave. And so what I anticipate here is that we're going to learn about pretty much everything for the rest of this calendar year, and then there will be a later year Direct, likely September, as that's usually when it happens. Well, they will outline, I guess, a lot of the first half for next year. But what this means in terms of my predictions is that I'm very uncertain about Nintendo announcing things that will be coming out in 2027. I don't want to say there won't be anything from 2027 that will be in this presentation, but I do think it's going to be pretty light. Maybe there's like one thing that Nintendo shows off that's teasing the future beyond, and that would be it. Now, what would be that thing they would tease that's coming out next year? Well, honestly, I don't want to predict this, but I'm going to at least have the conversation, so if it happens, I don't deserve full points here. But I just want to say that I do think it's at least plausible that Nintendo will tease 3D Mario. Why do I think this? Because I do think it's important to sell the future of the Switch 2. It is new hardware, and Nintendo wants to make sure they at least hit their forecast, but they may be trying to hit an even higher target for the amount of Switch 2s they're trying to get out this year. And at least teasing that 3D Mario isn't far off, I think would certainly do wonders for a lot of people. And considering that the Mario movie just came out, and the Mario 40th anniversary and all that, having something like that teased could be beneficial. I did talk about a few days ago how back in 2023, Miyamoto was in an interview where he did mention to pay attention to Nintendo Directs when asked about the future of Mario. He was laughing about it, and then shortly after, Mario Wonder was announced in the next Nintendo Direct to come out that year. Something similar happened this time around, where in a December issue of a magazine, Miyamoto was talking about how he's excited to see what would follow up Mario Odyssey during the Mario movie and anniversary promotional runs, very similar to 3 years ago. Not exactly the same, the timing's a little bit looser, but certainly similar, and so perhaps that is a subtle indication by Miyamoto that we could at least be getting a teaser for 3D Mario soon. Like, I do believe 3D Mario has to be coming pretty soon. I would have thought it would have been coming out this year if it weren't for the Ocarina of Time remake reports, which also included reports for Splatoon Raiders coming out in summer, which has been confirmed, and Star Fox coming out in June, which wasn't even announced yet and having that quick turnaround. So the reports are looking pretty strong, and while they do mention an Ocarina of Time remake, they also mentioned that 3D Mario would not be coming out until 2027. And you might say, well, 3D Mario, sure, perhaps it is a 2027 release, but maybe it's more likely coming out in the second half of 2027. And I feel like that's probably a pretty reasonable expectation. However, the scenario where I envision them teasing 3D Mario in this June presentation would basically be is if they are planning for it to come out before the end of the fiscal year, which would be by the end of March 2027. Nintendo oftentimes does have a big game to close their fiscal year in March. And similar to Pokopia this year, they might be planning one more big system seller release to hit or exceed their sales forecast, and 3D Mario would certainly do the trick, and people have been talking about how Pokemon Winds and Waves might not even come out early next year, so perhaps Nintendo would want to have a sizable gap between the release of Mario and Pokemon, two Megaton releases that supposedly are happening next year. So if 3D Mario is teased and they just kind of show like a very quick glimpse and it says 2027, then my prediction is that that game is coming out before the end of the fiscal year. But if that's not happening, then we're not going to see 3D Mario until later on. Now, here's a brief message from today's sponsor. Do you find yourself feeling tired, unable to take a good nap during the day from wherever you may be? Then perhaps you are in need of a soft, comfortable sleep mask that blocks out all light. Fortunately, Mantis Sleep, the sponsor for today's video, has just that, a quality sleep mask. This sleep mask has super soft, comfy cushions that cover your eyes and block out all light. It's easy to adjust to different sizes, and it feels great to wear. And it's helped me personally fit in just a bit more rest during my days. And signing up now might just be the perfect time to enjoy the summer night sale between June 19th through July 15th to save up to 20% off. So if you're looking to improve your sleep and energy, check out the Mantis Sleep Mask using the link in the description below with my code SLEEPRESTART. But before getting into all of my other first-party predictions, let me touch on some third-party stuff. There are so many third-party things happening. There's a lot of things happening already. There's going to be more things happening throughout Summer Games Fest. Like, we've learned about Rayman Legends Retold. That's coming to Switch 2. That looks awesome. But in terms of third-party stuff, what I'm going to predict we'll see in the Direct, we are going to see a trailer of Call of Duty running on Nintendo Switch 2, the new Modern Warfare 4, and because these have both been rated, we are going to see an announcement for Black Ops 1 and 2 coming to modern platforms, including the Switch 2. I can sort of see it being treated a lot like how Capcom has treated Resident Evil coming to Switch 2, where they're like, hey, now the big new one's coming, here's some old ones as well that you can play. So that's what I envision, and on that note, talking about Capcom, I do predict that we are going to see official announcements for the Resident Evil remakes coming over to Nintendo Switch 2, 2, 3, and 4, perhaps even as a collector's pack. Now, maybe that's something they want to push off until next year because they had Resident Evil 7, 8, and 9 come out early this year, but we have heard they're on the way. I do think they are coming. I think it's just a matter of time, and I don't think it's going to be a lot of time. But another game that I think is going to be announced for Nintendo Switch 2 from Capcom is Monster Hunter Wilds. Monster Hunter always does well on Nintendo. The Switch 2, I believe, can absolutely have a solid version of Monster Hunter, and perhaps we're getting to that point where they would want to be announcing an expansion for Monster Hunter, and they can position things where the Switch 2 will have the base and the expansion ready at launch when that happens. Transitioning over to first-party stuff, we're going to first talk about what is a collaboration, because while it is a third-party developer making this game, it is being published by Nintendo. The Duskbloods. The Duskbloods, I believe, will be in this presentation. Finally, we're going to get an update after over a year, because the last time we saw this was in the first big Switch 2 Direct last April. We're now in June, so it's been over a year, 14 months. So we're going to see this here, and obviously we are going to learn more. I don't think we're going to get an exact release date in this Direct. I think they're going to tell us winter 2026, which to me means December. I know some people think December is a terrible time to release this. Perhaps you're right, but we've also seen Nintendo put out some pretty significant core-centric titles in December, such as Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which became the best-selling Xenoblade games in the series, well, such as Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, the best-selling fighting game of all time. Now, Metroid Prime 4 did also recently come out in December, and from that, we've seen that sales have been lukewarm. However, also, the game didn't review well. And also, it's still early on. Who knows? Maybe it'll go on to sell a little bit better. But the overall sentiment with Metroid Prime 4, while I did personally enjoy it, and I do think is a good game, I still will also admit is below expectation, and so perhaps its sales success has more to do with that, maybe some poor marketing, as opposed to it coming out in December. And so the Duskbloods coming out in December, I don't necessarily think is a bad thing, but it's also not a typical Nintendo title either, and perhaps for that reason, Nintendo and From Software would agree on a different time slot, but there's just so much going on, I'm not quite sure where else they would fit it in. Maybe October. But let's now get into all that other stuff. So, what I think a lot of you are going to realize about my predictions, they're going to sound a lot like what we've talked about throughout the year. Like, pretty much what I've been talking about as my expectations have not changed. They are pretty much the same. However, I will tell you a little bit more about what I think is going on with each of these projects. So yeah, Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, I do believe that's the next big Nintendo title, and I don't really think this is supposed to be a big surprise. If you look at how things have been kind of handled by Nintendo, they've been just kind of putting out that next thing we sort of knew was coming. Even though we don't have an exact release date, the last game that is officially announced, I think, is the next game that is coming. That is Fortune's Weave. We've already started seeing ratings come out for it. According to leak, it's supposed to come out in summer, so I'm actually anticipating that this is the August release for Nintendo, at least the major one. And I say that because I do think, as Nintendo has been doing since the Switch 2 has come out, there are going to be a lot of Switch 2 editions sprinkled in, and if not a Switch 2 edition, some sort of other smaller release, a complimentary release per month. Nintendo's going to have multiple releases per month, ultimately leading to an average far above 12 published titles in the year, perhaps closer to 24, as things typically go for Nintendo. There's a lot of talk of a Pikmin 4 Switch 2 edition. I do think this is one of the games that deserves a Switch 2 edition the most, so I do anticipate that. There are others that have been teasing it beyond the reports, such as Nintendo, I believe. Although it was very cryptic, it's up for interpretation, but I do believe most people would agree with me there. And so I think that's likely going to be announced during this Nintendo Direct presentation as well. And while some people might not be super excited about another Switch 2 edition, I will tell you that some Switch 2 editions have had some pretty significant DLC, and I think Pikmin 4 has so much potential for some exciting expansion quests here, and with better visuals and some mouse controls, that actually might be very much worth it, especially for people who already bought it. They're only have to pay a small fee to play the Switch 2 edition with the new content. Basically, I think people are going to be pretty positive about this announcement when it happens. And I also think, yeah, it's a summer release. Maybe it even is that complimentary title to Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave in August. But another game I'm going to predict, and I'm predicting this is going to be a brand new title, not a Switch 2 edition or a remaster or anything like that, but I am predicting that we are going to see the next Switch Sports title. Maybe Nintendo will call it Switch Sports Resort, Switch Sports 2. I could actually see a scenario where this comes out and it has completely new sports, nothing like the sports in Switch Sports, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's actually a budget release, not too different from what we've seen in Splatoon Raiders and Star Fox. But I also anticipate that Nintendo would announce a Switch Sports edition or some sort of enhancement to Switch Sports, an update of some kind, so those games can look a little bit better at a higher resolution, so you can have a full slate of a whole bunch of different kinds of Switch Sports with the original and the new wave of them with this Switch Sports Resort, and I wouldn't be surprised if that is the late summer release. Now, a lot of this stuff has been hinted at or leaked, But the game that hasn't been heavily leaked for this year, like, yeah, there is a rumor that it's in development, and there's a rumor about there being a Luigi's Mansion amiibo, which might indicate that there is a Luigi's Mansion game coming out soon. There isn't really anyone out there saying it's coming out this year. And this is where I'm going to predict it's coming out this year. Now, I also predicted it might come out last year. And that was based off the fact that if you look at the history of games made by Next Level Games, they come out with a game every 3 years. So with them not having come out with a game last year, they are overdue. Yes, they had like 3 people help out with Metroid Prime 4, but that's just some minor support work that happens with different Nintendo developers all the time. They've had all hands on deck for a game for multiple years now, longer than usual. I think that most likely is Luigi's Mansion 4, and if 3D Mario is not coming out this year, it does make sense to have some other significant Mario property title coming out this year to take advantage of that popularity boost from the Mario movie. Luigi being one of the stars of the show certainly makes sense, and I think that actually would be a fantastic October release, which is part of why I think the Duskbloods could be the December release. Now, it's also possible that both games could come out in the same month. We've seen that during the October through December months, Nintendo can really put together a jam-packed lineup. Just going back to last year, we had Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, Pokemon Legends ZA, Kirby Air Riders, Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, and Metroid Prime 4 come out in a 9-week period. So to suggest that we might have 3 games come out in a similar period, I don't think is at all a lofty expectation, considering Nintendo exceeded that literally last year. Now, if Luigi's Mansion 4 is still not ready, I'll then put it out there that I could see something Metroid happening. I do think Mercury's Steam has to be pretty close. There are rumors of a Super Metroid remake. I'm not super confident that we'll be seeing that this year, but if Luigi's Mansion 4 is not like that cool Nintendo title for that Halloween period, I do think Metroid would fit quite well, and so perhaps Nintendo might want to put that out, although personally my expectation is that that would be coming out next year. I don't think Luigi's Mansion would be the only other Mario property thing that's announced during this Direct though. Or at least, I would think that finally Nintendo would announce some paid DLC, some expansion content to Mario Kart World. They've been doing some consistent free updates every few months, some little things here and there to improve the overall flow of the game, and that's been nice, but we need some substantial upgrades here. I would love to see them announce like some sort of big pass, kind of like the Booster Course Pass. We've talked about the evidence that they are holding back on some Mario Kart content relating to Donkey Kong, which perhaps would be tied into these waves, and so I do think that this is not that far off, and perhaps the only reason we haven't seen it yet is because Nintendo's been very patient about having these bigger Nintendo Directs. I do have to consider the possibility, though, that maybe Nintendo will have us wait even longer for Mario Kart World DLC. As disappointing as that might be, eventually it's gonna come, I'm not worried about that. And so the Mario Kart DLC still isn't announced in this Nintendo Direct. I would then start to entertain the possibility that maybe Nintendo could announce something relating to Smash Brothers. I do think something Smash Brothers has to be not that far off. I'm not saying we're going to be getting a totally brand new Smash Brothers really soon, because Sakurai just finished up with Kirby Air Riders, and I just don't think that it's been all hands on deck for that and Smash Brothers over the last few years. But I also think there's an opportunity to simply expand on Smash Ultimate. I think they might do something a little bit grander than just a Switch 2 edition, or if they do, they'll just really promote it well and show how exciting of a Switch 2 edition it is. Like perhaps including a brand new Fighters Pass, Volume 3, maybe more. And so maybe you kind of see where I'm getting at with this. If Nintendo doesn't announce like waves of DLC coming for Mario Kart, perhaps Nintendo would instead want to announce waves of Smash content on the way. That way we kind of have like that something to sort of look forward to every few months in terms of getting an update for one of the bigger Nintendo titles. Although Smash content coming out in waves might be something saved for the next brand new Smash, which likely may still be a few years away, and so instead maybe we get just kind of like some sort of Switch 2 Deluxe Edition that does have some new stuff. But considering how this year would go, I also kind of feel like that could be saved for next year quite easily. But on to my conclusion. The biggest game that Nintendo will be putting out this year is the game we all expect, the game that will be celebrating Zelda's 40th anniversary, the game that will be a big piece to the promotional run leading throughout the holidays, leading into early next year, getting people excited to watch the live-action Zelda movie in late April. And that's the remake for The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, reported by now many, something we've theorized about for several years. And supposedly it's coming. And what's exciting is that we've been thinking about and pondering upon how they might handle this, what they might do, just how ambitious it might be. We're gonna finally find out, supposedly, in this upcoming Direct next week. Next week, we're finally going to see what this beauty of a project is. I do think the absolute worst case scenario, and a very unlikely one, is that it's just kind of like Ocarina of Time 3D upscaled. I've talked about so many times how this would be such a terrible, terrible business move, a tone-deaf decision that wouldn't really make sense and would not push Switch 2 units. Instead, what I think this is, as what we've heard from some of the rumors and reports, is that this is a fairly ambitious project, and I do anticipate this could be the beginning of other remakes coming later down the road, a third pillar of Zelda development. That is my prediction. So you have the teams that work on the open-air Zelda, you have the team that works on 2D top-down Zelda, and then you have this joint effort putting together the remakes as well, which would then lead to some consistent Zelda content, so we don't have to wait 6 years for every Zelda game. But what I anticipate about this remake is that, yeah, it's going to be ambitious. How ambitious, though? Well, I am divided. I think it is going to be something more significant than Ocarina of Time 3D. And what I mean by that is more significant for Ocarina of Time 3D for its respective time. So Ocarina of Time 3D was actually a pretty exciting project when it came out in 2011. That was taking advantage of the 3DS hardware. It was a significant remaster. It included Master Quests, so the dungeons were remixed for a second run. That was also more challenging. There was a boss rush mode. There was a lot of quality of life updates. I think the ambition for the remake this time around is going to be more significant than that. It's going to be a true remake. Visually, it's going to be made to look like a modern Zelda game, so it's going to be a great demonstration of what the Switch 2 can do, so this is going to be a visually pleasing game. But I also think this is going to be a remake, and in some cases reimagining elements. I'm not talking about making it like a giant open world game. That's not what I'm saying. I don't think it's going to go that far. But I do think we're going to be seeing reimagined elements. I do think things are going to be scaled up in different ways. I think there's going to be a lot added to the world that will be really significant for Zelda theorizing, for lore and stuff like that. It will give us a better understanding of timeline placement, or rather recontextualizing Ocarina of Time with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom in mind. I think there's going to be connections there. I think there's going to be full voice acting with incredible cutscenes. I think the combat is going to be renewed. I think the bosses are going to be revamped. They're going to feel fresh. They're going to feel ambitious. I think it's going to be pretty awesome. Where I hold back on is considering if they'll add like new side quests to the game. Maybe they will. I don't know how much. Maybe just a very little bit, like just like a random side venture. Kind of how like in Link's Awakening remake they added the Dungeon Maker stuff. Maybe they put in something like that. But really I just hope that they fill up the world a little bit more. Do a few more things that help things to make sense. I don't think they're gonna add a whole bunch of new dungeons. In fact, I think there's a great chance they don't add any new dungeons. But if they're going to add a new dungeon, if they're going to go that far, I do think they would be them adding a light temple dungeon in the middle of the game. And if they go this far, I would also predict that they're going to be giving us new abilities with the medallions, which would then have further gameplay implications, which then maybe makes this even more ambitious than what I'm suggesting. I get it, but I do think this is going to be considered maybe the most ambitious remake we've ever seen from Nintendo. I do think this is going to be considered even more significant of a remake than what we're seeing of Star Fox here, and I feel like for Nintendo standards, that's certainly a step up from things we've seen before. So there's plenty of room for excitement here. I think this is going to certainly fit the role of the big holiday seller, the marquee title, the killer app for Switch 2 this year. So that is my prediction. Will I be wrong? Will I be right? Let me know what you think. Tell me what your predictions are. How do you think things are going to go? I'm very curious. Let me know in the comments below. But if you've gone this far and you find yourself enjoying my videos and you haven't subscribed quite yet, please subscribe. We're trying to get to 60K soon. That would be wonderful. But I'm excited for this Direct. No matter what comes, I'm sure there's going to be some cool surprises. But this is AndresRestart, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye. And don't forget, you can use my code SLEEPRESTART when checking the link in the description below for the Manta Sleep Mask.